Good morning, everyone. My name is Ricky, and for my Keystone, I pursued a thesis through the Pardee School of Global Studies under the guidance of Professor Noura Lori. My thesis is titled Small States at Odds, Understanding the Relationship Between the UAE, Qatar, and the Muslim Brotherhood. I'll start with a little bit of background just so we have a clear understanding. So my states of interest were the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, which is a federation of 7 emirates, and it's run as a semi-constitutional monarchy. This means that there is a ruling monarch, there is a constitution, but the monarch retains a significant degree of executive and legislative power. My other state of focus is Qatar, which is a hereditary monarchy and also semi-constitutional. So important to note, both of these countries have constitutions, but their monarchs retain a significant amount of power, which plays into a lot of the state public dynamics. I'll also talk a bit about the Gulf Cooperation Council. So the Gulf Cooperation Council is a major regional political and economic union between Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, and Qatar, and it was formed in 1981. The next thing to cover is the Muslim Brotherhood. So the Muslim Brotherhood is the largest current political Islamist organization. It was established in Egypt in 1928 by Hassan al-Banna and took up residence mostly in Egypt until the 1950s when the Brotherhood members were expelled from Egypt by President Nasser in an effort to promote a pan-Arabist secular regime. From there, the Muslim Brotherhood moved on to the Gulf states where they were initially welcomed with open arms. And between the 50s and the 80s, they were very heavily involved in the education and social sectors of society. So there were a lot of Brotherhood leaders teaching in universities or being involved in social organizations. However, in the 1990s, this kind of all went downhill with the rise of the Sahwa movement in Saudi Arabia, which presented a significant threat to the regime. And as a result, the Muslim Brotherhood was rapidly suppressed in much of the Gulf. In the 21st century, we've seen the Brotherhood be involved significantly in major political movements across the Middle East and North Africa. So in 2011, with the Arab Spring, they were in power briefly in Egypt under Mohamed Morsi, as well as being implicated in other protest movements and uprisings across the region. So the research question that I explored for this paper was, why has the rift between the UAE and Qatar, two otherwise similar states with similar international goals, developed over the Muslim Brotherhood? So you might be asking, why does this matter? This question has both theoretical and policy implications. On the theoretical side, we have, how are relationships between Islamist organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood likely to develop with Middle Eastern and North African regimes in the future? They've shown a lot of political potency, a lot of ability to influence change, and so this question is going to become increasingly prominent in coming years, I suspect. And on the policy side, we've already seen fallout from this split with the Qatar diplomatic crisis in 2017, which resulted in major border closures, severing of diplomatic relations, and significant splits within the GCC. And it is likely that this divide is going to continue to challenge regional politics in the years to come, making it important to understand. So I'll talk now a little bit about my data sources and methodology. Much of my research for this was conducted through a media analysis. So that begs the question, why media? Why not like laws or press releases or something like that? The stringent press and publication laws in the Gulf countries mean that oftentimes the media can serve almost as a mouthpiece for state attitudes. Because of these stringent press laws, the government approves a lot of what's published, which means that their attitudes may be more permeated throughout publications than in states with different freer press laws. The sources I used for this, I have a few screenshots on the side of 4 of the articles. The top 2 are from Qatar and the bottom 2 are from the UAE. So I used major English news outlets from Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. I picked these as being the largest, they have the broadest audiences and are the most well-known of the English-speaking outlets. I then performed a search based on the keyword Muslim Brotherhood and went down the path of 2 types of analysis. A quantitative analysis where I looked at frequency and relative frequency between 2000 and 2022 to see how often articles were being published that featured this key term and how that might vary between my countries of interest. On the qualitative side, I performed a content analysis from 3 key years, 2012, 2013, and 2017, where I randomly selected articles from each outlet and considered them for content, tone, and language. So a little bit about my results. On the quantitative end, I saw frequency spikes between 2011 and 2013 and between 2017 and 2019. These are profoundly unsurprising as they're correlated with major regional events involving the Brotherhood between 2011 and 2013, the Arab Spring, Mohamed Morsi's rise to power in Egypt, and ouster in 2013. and then between 2017 and 2019, when the Qatar diplomatic crisis was really at its peak. It was these spikes that led me to choose 2012, 2013, and 2017 for my content analysis, as I felt that they would provide the best window into state attitudes and media behaviors. On the content end, I found significant content differences between all these countries. You can see on the right-hand side of this slide 3 screenshots from 3 2013 articles that I selected. And you can very clearly see a difference in tone, so I'll cover that quickly. The Qatari news outlets were more neutral, typically regurgitating press releases that had come from other leaders, heavy use of quotations, but not a lot of opinion imposed by the author. Whereas the Emirati and Saudi outlets took a significantly heavier anti-Brotherhood tone. You can see in the middle title, Brotherhood's affiliates seek to spread chaos in the UAE and elsewhere, is a very different title from Brotherhood offers talks to end crisis over Morsi. The other thing that I thought was interesting was that there was a very limited mention of religion or Islamism of the Brotherhood at all in these articles. It was much more focused on their political work and their political agenda, which is part of what led me to my main conclusion, which is that the division between these two states over the Muslim Brotherhood is not actually about the Islam of the Brotherhood or Islam in general. It's about political maneuvering and behavioral considerations that they're making based on their position in the region. So being a small state, which both of these two countries are, means you require certain strategies to maintain your security, autonomy, and influence. Small states are most notably characterized in IR for a lack of hard powers. They don't have a really big military. They don't have that kind of ability to affect change, so they're forced to go about it through other ways. My triangle on the right was taken from a book I cited heavily from that talked about how small states can have 2 of the 3 options. They cannot have all 3. So in this case, Qatar is seeking to preserve autonomy and influence through neutrality. There have been multiple instances in the 2010s where Qatar sought to be a regional mediator, sought to involve itself in regional events on a more neutral ground. This has had very mixed results, but that's a different question. On the UAE side, they are seeking to preserve security and influence through affiliating closely with Saudi Arabia, which we could see in the similarities in tone and presentation of articles between these two countries. It is contrasted to Qatar. I posit the split is likely to continue to persist as long as both parties continue to employ these strategies and continue to see their behavior as the best way to manage being a small state in a region that is rapidly changing. Thank you. Thank you.
If you had the opportunity to extend time-wise. It was a really nice presentation, again. If you had the opportunity to extend time-wise beyond 2012, 2013, and 2019, how would you have done that, and why?
I would love to go back to like the 1980s and 1990s, which is really when things began to unravel between the Gulf states and the Brotherhood, but there was really a lack of access. Beyond that, I couldn't find a great archive, and most of these records were only digitized 2000 or later. I even had very few articles in 2000, but I would love to look at that. I would love to have had the time to look over 2001, 2002, and just pick out other major regional events and be able to consider those as well.
Did you have any challenges in accessing certain sites or getting to certain numbers of articles?
Yes. That's an excellent question. I was locked out of both Saudi news sites. I used like incognito browsing, different IP addresses, a VPN, but past a certain point, I was unable to access any articles. The site would give me error messages or it would refuse to load. So this led to, I don't have complete data between about 2012 and 2020 from the Saudi news outlets, particularly Arab news. Saudi Gazette, I was able to access some stuff from 2013, which made my content analysis more possible. But yes, that was a significant limitation in my acquisition of data. Okay.
So since you highlighted the very different approach to the Muslim Brotherhood taken by Qatar at the UAE, I know you focused on those two countries, but did you find any sort of similar divisions in the other GCC states, or not much time to analyze those?
I really didn't look at it very much. I'm mostly focused on those two states. Expanding the project would be really interesting to look at particularly other small states like Bahrain and Oman, but I didn't really have time to access those or consider them.